My parents didn't hate me. That would have been easier to understand. They simply didn't see me. In our house, success had a sound. It was loud phone calls, clinking glasses, confident laughter at dinner parties. It was my father's voice filling every room like it owned the air. And my mother, always beside him, perfect posture, perfect smile, perfect timing. They were a team. And I was background noise. Ella, speak up, my father would say when relatives came over. People won't remember you if you whisper. I tried. But every time I opened my mouth, someone else spoke louder. Eventually, I learned something important. Silence doesn't mean weakness. It means observation. My parents built Perez Holdings from a modest logistics firm into a respected mid-level empire. That's the version printed in magazines. The unprinted version. They were brilliant, but reckless. Visionary, but impatient. And addicted to validation. They didn't want stability. They wanted admiration. I watched them sign deals without reading footnotes. I watched them trust people who flattered them. I watched them confuse applause with loyalty. And I watched quietly. At 16, I asked my father a question at dinner. Why do we expand when the margins are shrinking? He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. Because perception matters, he said. If people think you're growing, you are. My mother nodded approvingly. I didn't argue. I just memorized the answer. That night, I Googled financial leverage for the first time. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment my life split into two paths. The daughter they knew, and the woman I would become. When I left for college, they barely noticed what I studied. Finance. Economics. Risk modeling. No drama. No announcement. Just quiet excellence. I didn't intern at their firm. I didn't want nepotism. I wanted invisibility. So I worked under professors. Then hedge funds. Then shell companies. I learned how money moved when no one was watching. While my parents attended galas, I sat in windowless rooms learning how fortunes were quietly redirected. While they chased headlines, I chased systems. And slowly, very slowly, money started listening to me. By 27, I had my first anonymous fund. By 30, I was managing billions. Not flashy billions. Patient billions. Meanwhile, Perez Holdings was struggling. Not publicly, but structurally. They wanted to expand internationally, fast. Banks hesitated. Investors demanded control. And that terrified my parents more than failure. Then their advisors brought them an offer. A silent investor. No interviews. No board seat. No interference. Just capital. A lot of it. I remember the dinner when they told me. My father was glowing. We finally found someone who gets it, he said, pouring wine. Serious backing. Serious intelligence. My mother smiled like she'd won something. This investor understands discretion, she added. Unlike most people. She glanced at me without meaning to. I took a slow sip of water. Sounds impressive, I said softly. They didn't hear the irony. What they didn't know was that I'd read every one of their internal reports. I knew their vulnerabilities. Their inflated projections. Their hidden liabilities. I knew exactly how much leverage I'd have. The investment was structured through 4 layers of anonymity. Legal firewalls. Blind trusts. International funds. On paper, the investor didn't exist. In reality, she was sitting right there at the table. I didn't do it to humiliate them. I did it to understand something I'd carried my whole life. If they respected power, would they ever respect me? Weeks passed. Then months. The capital stabilized their firm. Expansion resumed. And something interesting happened. They started fearing their investor. Their timing is uncanny, my father said one night. They anticipate risks before we even see them. My mother frowned. I don't like that they know so much, she said. But I like the results. I smiled into my coffee. Every decision they made. I saw first. Every risk they took. I approved or blocked. They never questioned it. Because power, when invisible, feels like fate. Then came the board meeting. The one scheduled after a brutal quarter. The one where everything would be reviewed. The one where the investor requested, for the first time, to attend in person. My parents were nervous. "Who do you think they are?" my mother asked. "Old money. Tech." My father adjusted his cufflinks. "Whoever they are," he said. "They're about to see how good we really are." That morning, I dressed carefully. Nothing dramatic. Nothing recognizable. Just confidence, finally visible. As I stood outside the boardroom, hand on the door handle, I felt calm. Not excited. Not angry. Just ready. Because when that door opened, they wouldn't be meeting an investor. They'd be meeting the daughter they never invested in. The boardroom was colder than I expected. Not temperature-wise, but emotionally. Glass walls. Steel edges. A long polished table reflecting faces that believed they were in control. My parents sat at the head, confident, composed. They didn't look up when the door opened. Not at first. The assistant cleared her throat. "Our investor has arrived," she announced. That was when my father lifted his eyes. And froze. Time didn't stop. But it slowed enough for me to see everything. The tightening of his jaw. The flicker of confusion in my mother's eyes. The way both of them tried, instinctively, to place me somewhere I didn't belong. "Ella," my mother said softly. Not warmly. Uncertain. Like saying a name from a dream. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a sound that echoed far louder than it should have. "Yes," I said. "It's me." No one spoke. Board members glanced at each other, unsure if this was a joke. My father stood halfway, then sat back down slowly. "You're early," he said. It was the first thing his mind could grab onto. "I'm on time," I replied calmly. I took the seat opposite them. The one reserved for the investor. The one no one had ever sat in before. Silence thickened. My mother's hands trembled slightly. "Ella," she said carefully. "This meeting is confidential." I smiled. "I know." One of the board members cleared his throat. "Ms. Perez," he said to my father. "Is there some misunderstanding?" My father swallowed. "No," he said slowly. "There isn't." His voice sounded different. Smaller. "Would you like me to explain?" I asked the room. They nodded automatically. People do that when power speaks softly. "I represent the holding fund that acquired a 42% controlling interest over the last 18 months, I said evenly. "Through Laird Investments." Murmurs erupted. Someone dropped a pen. My mother stared at me. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." I met her gaze. "It is," I said. "And it's done." My father finally found his voice. "You lied to us," he said. I shook my head. "I stayed silent," I replied. "There's a difference." The room felt like it was holding its breath. "So all this time," my mother began, then stopped. "Yes," I said gently. "It was me." The board chair leaned forward. "Ms. Perez," he said carefully. "Why the secrecy?" I paused. Then answered honestly. I needed to know whether my influence would matter. Or only my last name. My parents couldn't look at me anymore. "Why?" my father demanded suddenly. "Why do this to us?" I didn't raise my voice. "I didn't do it to you," I said. "I did it because of you." I pulled out a folder. Placed it on the table. Inside were projections. Risk assessments. Recommendations they'd ignored for years. "You were expanding too fast," I continued. "Taking on risk you didn't understand." "You could have told us," my mother said, her voice cracking. I nodded. "I tried," I said. "You didn't listen." The room was silent again. This time, heavier. "I'm not here to take your company," I said. "I'm here to protect it." I looked directly at my father. "From yourselves." No one argued. Because every number backed me. The board voted. Not on ownership. On authority. The result was unanimous. Operational control shifted. Effective immediately. My mother's face went pale. My father stared at the table. I felt nothing. No triumph. Just closure. As the meeting ended, my father spoke quietly. "You never needed us," he said. I paused at the door. "No," I replied. "But I wanted you." The house looked smaller than I remembered. Not because it had changed, but because I had. My parents didn't invite me in. They simply stepped aside. Like strangers making room for something inevitable. The silence inside was heavier than the boardroom. No assistants. No advisors. No witnesses. Just blood. My mother finally spoke. "You humiliated us." I didn't take my coat off. "I protected your company," I said calmly. She shook her head. "You made us look weak." I met her eyes. "You were." My father slammed his hand on the table. "We gave you everything," he said. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked quietly, "Name one thing you gave me. That didn't come with conditions." Silence. Again. "You left," my mother said. "You abandoned us." I nodded. "Yes," I said. Because staying meant disappearing. My father's voice dropped. "You think money makes you powerful?" "No," I replied. "I think clarity does." I sat down. Not because I was tired. But because this conversation deserved gravity. "You never invested in me," I continued. "You invested in image." They flinched. "I watched you praise strangers for ideas I gave you at 16, I said. "I watched you trust men who flattered you and ignore your own daughter." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know," she whispered. I softened. "Just a little." "That's the problem," I said. "You never wanted to know." My father stood again. "What do you want?" he asked. The question wasn't angry. It was afraid. "I want transparency," I said. "I want sustainability. And I want one thing more." They waited. "I want distance," I finished. The word hit harder than money ever could. "Ella," my mother pleaded. "We're family." I nodded. "Yes," I said. "And family doesn't mean immunity." I stood. "I'll run operations," I said. "You'll remain public leadership. For now." My father exhaled sharply. "You're taking control." "No," I replied. "I'm earning it." As I walked to the door, my father said something unexpected. "You're not like us." I turned. "I know," I said. "That's why this company might survive." Outside, the night air felt clean. Clear. Unforgiving. For the first time in my life. I wasn't asking permission. Power doesn't arrive quietly. It arrives with resistance. My first week in control felt like walking through a room full of mirrors. Every executive reflected a different version of doubt. Some smiled too much. Some avoided my eyes. A few waited for me to fail. I started with audits. Not public. Internal. Clean. Brutal. Departments that hadn't reported losses in years suddenly found them. Contracts once labeled strategic revealed themselves as vanity projects. And loyalty. Loyalty turned out to be very expensive. The pushback came fast. "Too aggressive," they said. "Too sudden." One senior VP cornered me after a meeting. "You're moving too quickly," he warned. "People aren't ready." I looked at him calmly. "Neither was the company," I replied. "That didn't stop you." Whispers spread. "She's emotional. She's punishing her parents. She doesn't understand the culture." They were wrong. I understood it perfectly. That's why it had to change. The first real challenge came from Mark Ellison. 15 years at the firm. Board favorite. Untouchable. Or so he thought. He questioned every decision publicly. Smiled while doing it. "It's just concern," he said. "Healthy debate." I smiled back. "Then let's debate with data," I replied. I scheduled a review. Full transparency. Numbers on the table. Mark didn't show up prepared. I did. Your division has lost 12 million over 3 quarters, I said evenly. You hid it under expansion costs. He scoffed. Temporary losses. I nodded. For 15 years. The room went still. I didn't fire him. That would have been too easy. Instead, I reassigned his authority. Limited access. Clear metrics. The message was clear. Power here would be earned. Not inherited. Later that night, my mother called. You're tearing everything apart, she said. No, I replied softly. I'm removing rot. She cried. I didn't hang up. Leadership is lonely. Not because no one stands with you, but because no one can stand for you. Then came the leak. Anonymous. Strategic. Cruel. An article hit the press. Heiress stage coup at family firm. My face. My name. My silence weaponized. The board panicked. Stock dipped. My father begged me to respond. Say something, he said. I didn't. Instead, I did something worse. I let results speak. 3 contracts renegotiated. 2 losses contained. 1 major client retained. All within 10 days. The narrative shifted. Slowly. Reluctantly. But not everyone surrendered. Someone inside the firm wanted me gone. Badly. And they were willing to break the company. To make it happen. You don't feel betrayal when it happens. You feel confusion first. Then patterns. Then clarity. The first sign was subtle. A contract I had frozen suddenly moved forward. Not approved. Not reviewed. Just executed. I stared at the digital timestamp. Someone with senior access had overridden my authorization. That narrowed the list to 5 people. I didn't react publicly. Power doesn't panic. It watches. 2 days later, a shipment went missing. High value. Insured. Sensitive. The kind of loss that attracts regulators. Then came the third hit. A confidential memo, mine, appeared in the press. Edited. Twisted. Weaponized. This wasn't resistance anymore. It was sabotage. I closed my office door and pulled up the access logs. Late nights. Unusual patterns. One name appeared again and again. Mark Ellison. But certainty requires proof. And proof takes patience. I let it continue. That was the hardest part. Watching damage unfold while holding silence. I created a controlled leak. A fake acquisition plan. Tempting. Illegal. Perfect bait. Within 24 hours, it surfaced. Exactly where I expected. Exactly how I needed. I called an emergency board meeting. No warnings. No leaks. Mark arrived confident. Smiling. Arrogant. I projected the logs onto the screen. Access times. Email trails. Financial incentives. The room changed instantly. You sold internal data, I said calmly. To competitors. Mark laughed once. Then stopped. This isn't personal, he said quickly. It's business. I nodded. So is termination, I replied. Security escorted him out. No speeches. No drama. Just consequences. After the room emptied, my father stayed behind. He looked shaken. You knew, he said quietly. And you let it happen. Yes, I replied. Because I needed the truth undeniable. He sat down slowly. We built this culture, he admitted. I didn't correct him. Ownership had to start somewhere. That night, I walked through the office alone. Lights dim. Desks empty. The weight of what I'd done settled in. Leadership doesn't feel like victory. It feels like responsibility pressing into your spine. I went home and slept for 4 hours. Then woke up with clarity. This company wouldn't just survive. It would change. Even if it broke every illusion my parents had left. The regulators didn't knock. They arrived. Quietly. Formally. Unstoppable. It started with an email marked urgent. Then another. Then a call I didn't answer. Because I already knew what it meant. When sabotage turns public, the law follows. By noon, compliance teams filled the conference rooms. Auditors requested records going back 10 years. Not just my decisions. My parents. My father tried to reassure everyone. "This is routine," he said too loudly. "We've done nothing wrong." I didn't interrupt. Denial needs space before it collapses. I met with the regulators alone. Not because I had to. Because leadership doesn't hide behind family. They were polite. Sharp. Unimpressed by names. "You uncovered internal fraud," the lead investigator said. "But oversight failed long before you arrived." I nodded. I agree. The question hung between us. Who would be held responsible? The board wanted distance. My parents wanted protection. And suddenly, all eyes turned to me. "You could insulate us," my mother said that night. "Say you didn't know." I looked at her. "I did know," I replied. "And now I'll say it." My father's face hardened. "You'll destroy us." "No," I said quietly. "I'll tell the truth." I disclosed everything. Missed audits. Ignored warnings. Cultural negligence. Including theirs. The fallout was immediate. Fines. Resignations. Reputations cracked beyond repair. My parents were asked to step down. Not as punishment. As necessity. My mother wept. My father didn't. He just looked old. The press circled again. This time, sharper. "Daughter turns on family empire." I didn't respond. I worked. The company survived. Barely. Because truth, once spoken, cleans brutally. That night, my father knocked on my door. Not the CEO. Not the legend. Just a man. "You chose the company over us," he said. I shook my head. "I chose integrity," I replied. "You just weren't on the same side anymore." He left without another word. I stood alone, understanding something painful. You can love people. And still outgrow them. After the storm, silence feels suspicious. The company was quieter than I'd ever known it. No shouting matches. No ego-filled meetings. No performative confidence. Just work. Real work. I didn't rename the company. I didn't erase my parents from its history. You don't rewrite truth, you learn from it. The first thing I did was dismantle fear. Executives were used to surviving, not thinking. So I changed incentives. Transparency rewarded. Questions encouraged. Silence challenged. I met every department head personally. Not to threaten. To listen. One manager said quietly, "We've been waiting for this kind of leadership." Another admitted, "We didn't think it was possible here." That's when I knew. The culture had wanted to change. It just needed permission. We restructured everything. Short-term growth stopped mattering. Long-term survival did. We exited 3 markets. Sold 2 divisions. Took a public hit. The stock dropped. Analysts panicked. I didn't. Because for the first time, the numbers were honest. My parents disappeared from public life. No interviews. No defenses. Just silence. I visited my mother once. She looked fragile. "I don't recognize you anymore," she said. I held her hand. "That's because you never really knew me," I replied. It wasn't cruel. It was true. Months passed. Slow gains. Clean audits. Trust rebuilding inch by inch. Then came the offer. A massive acquisition proposal. The kind that makes headlines. The kind my father would have accepted immediately. The board waited for my answer. I said no. Shock rippled through the room. This would double valuation, someone argued. I nodded. And triple risk. They looked at me differently then. Not as a daughter. Not as a disruptor. As a leader. That night, alone in my office, I finally felt it. Not power. Peace. Because the company wasn't surviving anymore. It was standing. You can rebuild quietly. But reckoning. That demands witnesses. The first interview request came from a business channel. Then another. Then 10 more. They didn't want numbers. They wanted a story. A daughter versus her parents. A betrayal. A scandal. I declined all of them. Until one question reached me through my legal team. Who really owns Perez Holdings now? That question mattered. Because silence was starting to distort the truth. I agreed to one appearance. Live. Unedited. No spin. The studio lights were harsh. The host smiled carefully. Ella Perez, she began. Many people say you dismantled your parents' legacy. I didn't blink. I dismantled the lie around it, I replied. I spoke calmly. About systems. About accountability. About why unchecked ambition always collapses. I didn't insult my parents. I didn't defend them either. They built something remarkable, I said. And then they stopped listening. The clip went viral within hours. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was measured. That night, my parents broke their silence. A joint statement. Carefully written. Legally safe. Emotionally hollow. They claimed misunderstanding. Pressure. Health. They never mentioned my name. I read it once. Then closed the file. The next day, employees sent messages. Not praise. Relief. For the first time, I trust leadership. Thank you for choosing truth over loyalty. But the hardest message came from my father. A single line. You've won. I stared at it for a long time. Then deleted it. Because this was never a competition. Winning implies someone else had to lose. What I had done was choose a different measure entirely. I didn't expect him to call. Not after the message. Not after the silence. So when my phone rang and his name appeared, I let it ring twice longer than necessary. Just to remind myself, I had a choice now. Ella, my father said when I answered. No title. No authority. Just my name. We met at the old office. Not the headquarters. The first building. The one with the cracked marble floors and outdated furniture. The place where the company began, before ambition drowned intention. He was already there when I arrived. Older. Smaller. No assistants. No confidence armor. I won't take much of your time, he said. I nodded. Then say what you came to say. He looked at the window instead of me. I always thought strength looked like noise, he said slowly. Like domination. I stayed silent. You were quiet, he continued. And I mistook that for weakness. The words landed heavier than any apology. I didn't know how to see you, he admitted. I exhaled. That doesn't undo anything, I said. I know, he replied. But it explains it. He handed me a folder. Inside were handwritten notes. Early plans. Mistakes. Dreams he never shared publicly. I forgot why I started, he said. And you remembered. For a moment, he looked like a man meeting his own reflection too late. I don't want the company back, he said quietly. I don't want forgiveness. He finally met my eyes. I just wanted you to know. I'm proud of you. That was the hardest moment of all. Not the boardroom. Not the press. This. I didn't do this for you, I said gently. I know, he replied. That's why it matters. We sat in silence. Not angry. Not reconciled. Just honest. When I stood to leave, he said one last thing. You built something I never could. I paused. What's that? Something that doesn't need fear to survive. I walked out lighter. Not because the past was fixed. But because it no longer followed me. The company didn't explode into greatness. It stabilized. And that was the miracle. Years later, analysts would call it one of the most disciplined turnarounds in modern corporate history. They'd credit strategy, timing, market awareness. They'd miss the truth. The truth was simpler. Fear was removed. Perez Holdings stopped chasing admiration. It started earning trust. Employees stayed. Clients returned. Quiet competence replaced loud ambition. I refused to put my name on buildings. Refused interviews that framed me as a conqueror. Because I hadn't taken anything. I had returned something. One evening, I stood alone in the boardroom. The same chair. The same table. No ghosts this time. I thought about the girl I was. The quiet one. The invisible one. The daughter no one invested in. She didn't need revenge. She needed space. I funded scholarships anonymously. Not for branding. For balance. Because talent should never need permission. My parents never asked for forgiveness again. And I never offered it. We learned something harder than reconciliation. Respect without closeness. And it was enough. The final decision I made shocked the board. I stepped back. Not away. But out of the spotlight. Power shouldn't cling. It should circulate. I appointed leaders better than me. Louder than me. And watched them lead without fear. The company didn't collapse when I left center stage. It thrived. That's how I knew I'd done it right. Years later, a young analyst asked me quietly, "How did you become this powerful?" I smiled. I stopped trying to be seen. Oyuto. My parents never knew I was the anonymous investor holding $9 billion in their firm. Until the door opened. But the real surprise wasn't the money. It was this. Power doesn't come from being louder than everyone else. It comes from being undeniable.